And I can come smile. I don't fucking have to do no goddamn work. Okay? I don't have to do no work systemically, and I'm gonna be fine. And guess what? I will always get 38 to 45% of the white vote. If I get 30 to 45% of the white vote, I don't fucking have to damn get the black vote I got in this past election. I'll fucking win. You got a black city, that's great. You can have all black everything. And guess what? You won't have green nothing. The white money thinks that you are looking after their shit. They will take their shit to Prattville. They will take their shit to Pike Road, and you won't have shit. So what I'm gonna tell Karen when I meet with them, don't ever fucking tell me that I'm on fucking TV. Every time I'm on fucking TV, I get somebody from New York or LA calling about how can they invest in goddamn Montgomery. Do you think motherfuckers around here gonna invest in Montgomery? Do you think I expect the descendants of Confederate soldiers to fucking invest in Montgomery? Beyond what's good for them. Now, they give you some charity. They give you some charity. Okay? They do that. It's nice. Okay? They do some little nice things over here, Valley Cross, or on the board. Okay? But now, are they gonna really invest in systemic change? Hell fucking no, they're not gonna invest in it. So don't ever mix up what I'm doing there. There is a you haven't seen a scientist as diabolical as me, because no one has come into this with what I have. I got 45 years of being my dad's son who was sitting in 19.
Montgomery Mayor Steven Reed can be heard on newly released recordings that were reportedly taped 3 years ago. In them, you hear what sounds like Mayor Reed in a profanity-laced rant. The recordings were released online on a web page called Montgomery Deserves Better. Here's part of those recordings.
Don't ask me. I can come smile. I don't have to do no work. Okay? I don't have to do no work systemically, and I'm gonna be fine. And guess what? I will always get 38 to 45% of the white vote. If I get 30 to 45% of the white vote, I don't have to get the black vote I got in this past election. I'll win. You got a black city, that's great. You can have all black everything. And guess what? You won't have green nothing. The white money thinks that you are looking after their shit. They will take their shit to Prattville. They will take their shit to Pike Road, and you won't have.
It is important to note these recordings were released in the same year that Mayor Reed is up for re-election and just months ahead of that election. We reached out to the mayor's office for reaction and were told that city offices are closed for the holiday. When the mayor does respond, we'll share that with you. You can listen to more of the recordings that were released again on that website inside this story on the WSFA 12 News mobile app. Coming up tonight at 6, WSFA 12 News is talking with someone who was in the room when the mayor made those comments and corroborates what was said. Montgomery Mayor Steven Reed is at the center of a newly released audio recording posted online.
In them, you hear what sounds like Mayor Reed in a profanity-laced rant.
The conversation reportedly happened 3 years ago, but is only now being made public. WSFA 12 News anchor Sally Pitts shares parts of those recordings and has reaction from a man who claims he was in the room when they were made.
A group called Montgomery Deserves Better released the audio recordings. In it, the mayor discusses the black vote, white investment in the city, and Maxwell Gunter Air Force Base. We spoke to someone who claims to have been in the room at the time. He tells us this all happened nearly 3 years ago. Here's part of those recordings.
Don't tell me that I'm on TV. Every time I'm on TV, I get somebody from New York or LA calling about how can they invest in Montgomery. Around here gonna invest in Montgomery? You think I expect the descendants of Confederate soldiers to invest in Montgomery? Beyond what's good for them. Now, they give you some charity. They give you some charity. Okay? They do that. It's nice. Okay? They do some little nice things over here, Valley Cross, or on the board. Okay? But now, are they gonna really invest in systemic change? No, they're not going to invest in it. So don't ever mix up what I'm doing there. There is a you haven't seen a scientist as diabolical as me, because no one has come into this with what I have.
Charles Lee, owner of That's My Child, says he was there when the mayor went on the profanity-laced rant. He says a group of community activists were meeting with the mayor following the death of George Floyd to discuss keeping the peace in the capital city. Lee said the group thought they were meeting with the mayor about how to improve the city. Instead, he says they felt insulted.
And the mayor said, man, I don't got to do nothing. I don't got to do nothing. I'm always get 30, 80, 45% of the white vote, and I don't never need the black vote. To nothing but, we ain't nothing but black voters. So it's like, You tell nothing to our face, you don't need nothing.
I asked Lee if this audio is from nearly 3 years ago, why did they wait until now to release it? He said everyone involved in the meeting with Mayor Reed made a pact to not release it until they all gave the green light to put it out to the public. Sally Pitts, WSFA 12 News.
The release of those recordings comes just months before this summer's municipal election, in which the mayor is running for re-election. You can listen to the recordings on the WSFA 12 News app. As we told you at 6, we asked the mayor's office for a response, and we just heard from the mayor a few minutes ago. He said in part, quote, "This clip has been heavily edited and features carefully selected sound bites of my voice. The conversation was recorded without my knowledge or consent by the community member almost 3 years ago." The mayor goes on to say, quote, "During this meeting, it became abundantly clear to me that this individual sought personal financial gain during a time of crisis in our city, state, and country. You have my word that no one in my administration will ever give in to a shakedown or extortion," end quote. You can read the mayor's full statement on the WSFA 12 News app.
As the community reacts to the newly leaked audio, so are Montgomery City leaders. Some say they are shocked, while others are denouncing the remarks. WSFA 12 News reporter Brady Talbert is joining us live from the Montgomery City Hall. And Brady, what have you learned today?
Hey, Val, I reached out to every single Montgomery City Council member. Some of them didn't even pick up the phone. Others tell me they're speechless.
We're all shocked. We're just like eyeballs wide open and can't believe what, you know, what we saw and what we heard.
Councilman Brantley Lyons is still processing that allegedly leaked audio of Montgomery Mayor Steven Reed discussing black voters.
I will always get 38 to 45% of the white vote. If I get 30 to 45% of the white vote, I don't have to get the black vote I got this past election. I'll win.
Lyons says people have been texting him that video. He stresses the city council does not stand behind it.
We certainly don't agree with any of those comments that were made.
Other city leaders are also speaking out. Councilman Ed Grimes says, "I am shocked, deeply concerned, and incredibly disheartened." Councilman Clay McKenna says community members are rightfully concerned, adding, "In the interest of maintaining the public trust, I strongly urge our mayor and his office to offer a swift and direct explanation." Anyone who heard the recording knows there were several cuts in that audio. I asked Lyons if he believes it could have been edited out of context.
I don't know. I mean, I just look at, was that his voice? Were those his statements? And I don't know.
Certainly a lot of unanswered questions tonight. I also asked Councilman Lyons if he believes this will be a topic of discussion at tomorrow night's city council meeting. He says, "You never know." We'll keep you posted.
All right, thanks a lot, Brady. Again, we reached out to every city council member. Some did not respond. Others had no comment. The next city council meeting is tomorrow at 5 p.m. The mayor says he will meet with the media then to discuss this matter further.
Now to those audio clips featuring Montgomery Mayor Steven Reed that were released online this weekend. You can hear Montgomery Mayor Steven Reed using some harsh words in those audio clips about voters and investors. Mayor Reed says the conversation was recorded several years ago privately with a member of the community. Well, now he's speaking to the media. He has just taken the podium there at City Hall, where he plans to address these audio clips that were just released and made public just a couple of days ago and really blew up online just yesterday. Let's listen in now to what Mayor Reed has to say.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everyone for being here today. Certainly want to thank all of the texts and calls and notes expression of support from those around the community, from our faith leaders to other elected officials to members of the community, not just from the city of Montgomery, but to this entire state and throughout the country. Really honored to have such support during a time of challenge. And that's why I wanted us to have a conversation with the media today in light of what has taken place the last few days. Being here today is not because of a doctored or manipulated audio clip. Being here today is because of an extortion attempt on the mayor of this city by a man by the name of Charles Lee. He is the owner and founder of That's My Dog and That's My Child. His extortion attempt during the George Floyd aftermath was one of the most despicable and disgusting acts of cowardice that I've ever heard of, much less been a part of. And I'm confident once the people of this city get the context of some of this audio, it will not only show that I've been doing my job, but why I've been doing it with the passion of which I carry on. The doctored recording was made, and the meeting happened that some of you may have heard before I went into the middle of the George Floyd protests, where we had asked for the community to come out to show our understanding of the frustration of where many cities and communities were at that time in this nation. We initially were going to have that press conference here at City Hall. I made the executive decision to take it to the community because I know there are some who don't feel comfortable coming to City Hall because of their lack of understanding or maybe even their distrust of government. So we wanted to take it there. And in the midst of that, we decided to have a program or community leaders be a part of that program before I gave my speech. I didn't want any elected officials. I didn't really want anyone from the business leadership. I wanted to hear from the community, and I wanted the community to hear from some of their leaders. And so what we decided to do was to invite various people from across the community to be a part of that. And again, this was all hastily done because it was a matter of tense moments during that time. And I think if many of us can recall, there were cities going up in flames, and there was a lot of damage and civil unrest being done across communities, and we were all preparing for it. And so to say that the level of tension was high is an understatement. And so it was high for many days, from those of us who first witnessed the video, as I did on social media, the morning that it was posted, all the way through the protests that we had here in Montgomery. And so it was a tough day, but we decided to reach out to some community leaders and ask others for names. And one of the names that was mentioned was Charles Lee. And so on our way, I decided to ask Charles Lee to meet me at the Alabama Democratic Conference auditorium for a meeting. I didn't want to do the meeting here at City Hall because I really wanted to make sure that we were out in the community, touching the community in a way that did not seem to be fortified by city government. And so during the course of that meeting, it became very, very apparent to me that Mr. Lee did not come there as a helper to calm the community. He came out of an interest in personal gain. He came to shake me down. He came to extort the mayor of this city, at which on a day when tension was already as high as it could be, it went even higher. And it went higher because I was offended that others in the community who look at him as a role model and as someone who had been a leader would take that opportunity. The pain of a family, not only in Minneapolis, but the pain of a community across this country, to try to extort, shake down, or get money out of the city which he's not from, but the city that has embraced him and his charity. And so what you hear in splices of the manipulated audio is an angry person who is frustrated and is very, very displeased, to put it mildly, with someone who has gotten the confidence of many leaders in this community asking about where his money is and where is the $30,000 that purportedly was promised to him by a previous administration. And so you hear me frustrated, you hear me angry, and you hear a level of tension in my voice that most people probably won't hear because we aren't in that position. And at the time, looking back, and I thought about this almost immediately, I should have gotten up and left. I didn't leave because I didn't want to walk out on a community leader who may have said something in there, may have gotten over his skis a little bit on a day when we had the potential for major unrest. However, it was further in that conversation, which is not including the audio, that Mr. Lee then said what would happen if he didn't get any money, if he wasn't paid. Not only electorally as it relates to black votes and white votes, but what would happen to the city. And so in the moment, my outrage grew even more because now it went past the fact of money for me and my organization. It went to what I'm willing to do to burn this city down, to be a gaslighter. And that, during that time, was a very offensive approach, and it was something that really, to be honest with you, called into questions of my manhood. And probably outside of this position, I would have taken a different approach to someone during that time bringing that up. And so what you heard was verbal frustration and anger at someone who was literally taking the opportunity of so much pain in this country to use it for their personal profit. There was no one else in the room but one person that Mr. Lee brought with him, and I think he was there for part of the time. There were no other leaders or activists in that particular meeting. And so after that conversation, we had to go over to E.D. Nixon Elementary School, where we were met with many community members who were outraged and frustrated. And we gave a speech that I put together about understanding the need for more trust and transparency between our police department and our community. I apologize then for those that had not had the same opportunities that many others had had, and we allowed Mr. Lee to speak on that program. And only out of the interest of the overall goal of staying with those who thought that he would be a good advocate for the community did I allow him to speak. I decided not to prosecute at that time because I believed, after talking to community leaders and civic leaders, that it was the right thing to do. I was wrong. We should have prosecuted then, and we should have called into question what Mr. Lee's motivations were. However, it would not be until sometime later that we would learn that there was an audio recording of which I never knew about at the time. And at that time, Mr. Lee again asked for money in exchange for destroying the tape. Now, as an officer of the court for almost 7 years, I know what that is. And I'll be willing to testify under oath to what exactly happened, not only that day, but in subsequent days when this tape was shopped to many outlets, and it was shopped for sale as a way to extort this city and the mayor of this city. I talked with elected officials, and I talked with other civic leaders who asked me not to move forward because of the good they thought he might be doing in the community. Well, I think that looking at it now, we can see that probably was not the right step to take. They had been fooled like many others in the community, and they didn't know that they were dealing with a hustler, a shyster, and a liar. And that's who many have been dealing with when it comes to Charles Lee. And so when you hear a manipulated, doctored audio clip that has me talking as if I'm talking to myself, ask the question, why was this person recording it? Who else do they record? What was the overall intent of the recording? Ask yourself just some basic questions of why on that day, in a meeting at the Alabama Democratic Conference headquarters outside of City Hall, would someone try to utilize that for personal gain and personal profit? And so I want us to understand that we are here not because of any other reason, but someone who has an ulterior motive, which is to undermine this administration and the work that we have been doing. But I want to make it very clear that my views of the people of this city are not reduced to an hatchet job of some sideshow who wants to be more important than he is. I'm the mayor of every citizen of this community. I respect their concerns and dreams, and I know I need to earn their trust as well as their votes. I've been very direct as mayor about the state of race relations and the need to lift all of our community. I feel an obligation to do that as the first Black mayor of this city. And I get the opportunity to speak to the pain of this city and the progress of this city. I have these conversations regularly, in private and in public. Members of the white community, Black community, biracial, Muslim, Hispanic community, local, state, and national. I think that's my responsibility, is to have the tough talks. Because as mayors, sometimes that's what we have to do. We have to have those kind of talks about where we are. And so while I regret some of the bad language that is now public, part of the extortion attempt was that I needed to give Mr. Lee this money in order to help get white votes and Black votes. Well, as someone who has been in elected office since 2012 and who was the only person to win a countywide race and a citywide race, I know where votes are, and I know that votes are important. And I want to say this, no one ever has to question my understanding of Black votes and Black voters in not only this city, this state, this nation. I grew up in it, I participated in it, and I lead it. And so I understand the importance of Black voters, because without Black voters, I wouldn't have been probate judge. Without Black voters, I wouldn't be mayor. But without building that coalition beyond, we cannot move further as a city. We wouldn't have had a multiracial, multicultural, 67% percentage of voters with just Black voters. But we understand the importance of everyone who participates in the process. And so my objection to the threat of, if you don't give money, then we are going to do X, Y, and Z to make sure you don't get reelected, was taken in a way that I would take any type of challenge. It was taken in a way that I would respond, and that's direct and that's forceful. And so I want each and every one of you to know that I will not, and no one in my administration will ever be strong-armed into anything. We'll never be shaken down. We'll never allow that to happen. I realize that because that's my personal creed. Irrespective of my titles politically, that's who I am in the morning. That's who I am when I go to sleep. And so I know that to be a mayor for everyone, it's important to have this clearing of the air. And it's important for us to set the record straight and to have a moment of clarity. Because when you take a manipulated audio clip and you take something that's been chopped and screwed, as we used to say, you take something that's been remixed and hijacked and you purport it to be authentic, that's not only dangerous for me as the mayor, that's dangerous for any elected official, any public official, and anyone else who's in a private conversation with someone who may have ulterior motives. And so I want us to be aware of that, and I want us to understand why we're here. Because one man decided to put his personal gain over the benefit and well-being of this community during a time of crisis. And that's something that everyone needs to understand. And with that, I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank you for your interest, and I'd be more than willing to take any questions that you may have. Yes.
Mayor Charles Lee said he did not take that video. He did not release that video. You said he was the only community leader in that room. You called him a liar here today. Are you saying he's lying about that as well?
Charles Lee is a liar, he's a shyster, and he's a hustler. Let me be absolutely clear about that. Charles Lee shot that tape for the last 3 years. Civic leaders know that, elected officials know that. And when we file a complaint with the district attorney's office about this, they will have the opportunity to present that under oath. I have no issue with that, and I have no issue testifying to that. And we'll see if he wants to do the same, or if anyone who's connected to him will do the same as well.
I was going to ask, do you plan to take legal action against Lee?
At this point, absolutely. If this is where we are, then sure. That's what we're going to do. We're going to protect the integrity of the mayor's office at all times. We're going to protect the integrity of city government at all times. And when somebody breaches that and steps across that line, and they aren't willing to be talked down by, be it supporters of theirs, if they aren't willing to listen to people who may be advisors, then we'll let the legal process take its course. And again, as an officer of the court, there's not anything I said to you today I'm not willing to testify to under oath.
What would that legal action look like?
You have to talk to the district attorney about that. I think that means that we need to move forward with a complaint. And I think it's important for us to understand that in the aftermath of this, my chief of staff and outside legal advisor did meet with the district attorney. And so we have had a previous conversation, and the choice was left up to us about moving forward with charges at that time. And again, at that time, we appealed to the better angels. We were hoping to, at least, and we did not move forward. But we were wrong to do that in hindsight, and so we will take those next steps now.
Mayor Reed, you mentioned who else has he secretly recorded. Do you believe that there are others involved, and will they also face some type of legal action?
Well, I don't know who else he's recorded. I think that'd be a better question for Charles Lee. I don't know that anyone who's been recorded will be impacted. Again, that's a question for the district attorney and how they will move forward with that. Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, you mentioned that Mr. Lee requested $30,000 from the city that he felt was promised to him by the previous administration. Is there any clear cause that he may feel entitled to that money?
You know, Charles Lee had been calling on the office probably since shortly after I was elected. And apparently he had, access to the previous administration that he did not have with me. That may be a sense of entitlement that he may have felt. I never asked my predecessor about what conversations they may have or not have had. I only deal with things as they relate to my administration. And I think even if there are any agreements, that doesn't give you the right to try to extort or shake down the CEO of a city. And that's any city in the state of Alabama. That's not just Montgomery. And I think that this is, a lot bigger than just myself, this again calls into question other elected officials and how they have to interact, because there are strict guidelines on what we can do and what we can't do, but the public is not necessarily does not necessarily have to operate in those same guidelines that we do. So when someone does something as egregious as this, and again, I want to go back to the timing of this. I mean, this is disgusting. When you consider what was going on, and for any of you in the media, you go back and you look at what you were writing and you were sharing on social media on that day, and I think that we'll understand why, again, tensions were as high, as they were. The incident itself was bad enough. The uncertainty of what was happening in communities had not reached that level in decades in most cities. And so I think when you consider a person that had been held out or purported to be a leader to go to that length of bringing up something they may have felt was owed to them, the city of Montgomery doesn't owe any nonprofit anything. Let me be very clear, not one. The city of Montgomery and the city council do that out of their priorities and out of our goodness of being stewards of taxpayer dollars. And that's why since that time I haven't allocated or authorized any dollars to go to this charity. It wasn't anything personal. We do that for 99.9% of the requests that we have. But I think for anyone who is willing to extort a public official, I don't think they're worthy of city money, county money, state money, or any other public dollars. Now, that's my personal opinion. Yes, ma'am. I think in the back. No? Yes, ma'am.
We heard some views on the tape expressed about the military and white support for the city of Montgomery.
Yeah.
You still feel the same way?
Well, I think those views were taken out of context, to be blunt with you. I think those were strongly manipulated. We've had a great relationship with Maxwell Air Force Base. We worked with them to help pass a school referendum. They were very, very supportive of that. I've had great relationships with the generals there, the Air University commanders. And, one of the things that, came up was, we even came up a little bit during the campaign, was the concern about losing Maxwell. My thought has always been not only stabilizing Maxwell's presence here, but growing it and making sure they're part of the community. And I'm glad that some of those conversations have involved them doing more now with the city of Montgomery and the communities in Montgomery than they were doing prior to that. And so we value their presence, we understand the impact, and we certainly respect and appreciate the service of all of our men and our armed forces here, whether it be at Maxwell, Gunner, the Air National Guard, and so forth. Yes, I'll come right back to you.
Mayor,
yes.
Given in the context of that, why did you say what you said on the tape about not caring about Maxwell, or the comment that you made about they need to do something that I care about? They want me to do something about Maxwell. Why did you say that?
Well, I don't think that was a complete statement. Again, I think anytime you have a audio clip that has been selectively edited like this, that to me calls into question all of it. And so there are some parts that I can remember very vividly. I don't remember what Mr. Lee asked me or what his statement was at that time about Maxwell Air Force Base. I'll just say this. My wife's uncle is a former 4-star general. There aren't a lot of black Air Force 4-star generals in the history of the Air Force. My brother-in-laws went to the United States Air Force Academy. I got to know General Cotton, who's now a 4-star general in the Air Force while he was here, General Hecker, and now getting to know General Tullis. So I certainly understand their leadership and their passion for not only our nation, but freedom in this world. And so I don't yield that to anyone. At the same time, we've had conversations, and I've had with all of them, about what they can do to be more part of the community. And most of them have asked, how could they be more part of Montgomery? How can we break down the barrier between the walls of the military installation and this community? And so we're seeing more programming, we're seeing more interaction in that. But again, I think that's the danger. And let me be very specific. I think the media has to be very careful. And I think the media has some really hard questions to answer themselves. Because when you purport something that has been that cut up, I talk to a lot of people on a daily basis. Now, I could cut up a lot of conversations, be with the governor, it could be with the congressman, it could be with some CEO. Are we going to now just take any piece of information that somebody's been shopping around for 3 years, selling it to the highest bidder, and purport that as being authentic? If I go out and I have a lunch right after this is over, and I'm with someone, can someone then Photoshop that and then make that picture and get it to one of the news outlets as being authentic? Maybe it's me with an envelope in my hand. Maybe it's me meeting with someone and there's something else that's happening. I think the media has some responsibility in this as well. And I think it's not just any one outlet. I think that all have to really check and decide what are we going to determine is legitimate. Because when we get into the media being confused with what someone puts up on their Facebook page or what someone puts up on their own social platform, then we get into really uncertain territory. And I think we don't want to break off the communication with the media. We don't want to have to break off communication with the public. But I do think it's important for us to make sure everybody is being accountable. Because when you take a doctored clip, one that by all accounts people will acknowledge has been doctored, that's a problem because many of our citizens, many of our residents take that as being authentic. And I think that's the question for everyone to consider. Yes, sir. And then I'll come right to you. I'll come right back to you, Sally.
Just to start up on the previous two questions.
Sure.
Do you or do you not stand by the comments that were on tape, or are you saying that wasn't you?
What comments?
The comments that were recorded.
Well, it depends on which ones you're talking about.
I'm talking about all the comments.
Well, some of them I do. Depends on the context.
The context determines whether you stand by what you said?
It depends on the context of what you're talking about. Well, you just asked me 3 questions. Yes, sir.
So, Mayor, you mentioned that the DA is now involved in the situation. They previously investigated as well, and where are they investigating?
Just an initial meeting was had with the district attorney, and at that time they gave my chief of staff, Chip Hill, and legal advisor Peck Fox some information about what they thought had happened based on how the information was relayed to them, and then what our next steps were or could be. And what we decided to do was to not move forward at that time.
But now they're investigating.
No, I don't know the investigation has started at this time. I think there will be subsequent steps for us to take before that. Sally, I know you know. I'm sorry.
Mayor, the request is there for that full uncut version of the audio recordings. Until then, we're asking you to give us some context. There you say this is doctored audio. Can you tell us what's authentic, what's fabricated?
Well, the fact that it's not a two-way conversation is doctored. All right. What were the questions? What was the topic of conversation that we were having? What was said prior to that? So I don't deny having an elevated level of tension on the day of June 1st, 2020. Whatsoever. I don't deny being offended by someone taking that as a time to try to extort the city of Montgomery whatsoever. So again, while I regret the language being made public, a lot of the conversation was initially about how do we keep the community safe? How do we keep the community calm? And that conversation instantly went to money and a payoff. And so for me, that's a problem. A lot of what we talk about in that meeting got outside of the realm of the day's events, which were protests around the murder of George Floyd, and got into other things that were happening and who said what and he said this and that. Or what would happen if you don't do this, or what would happen if you don't do that. So listen, in hindsight, 3 years in, as I am now, I would have gotten up and left at the first mention of money. At the time, my thought was, well, I don't want to cut this meeting short with a community leader because I don't want to treat him any different than I would a CEO or any other leader in the community. And so we talked, and the conversation got animated back and forth. But for some reason, his statements and questions aren't on the audio clip. So I think we just have to kind of keep that in mind. Am I getting the hook?
Charles Lee to release the full audio from start to finish, or does the city have the audio?
I'm sorry?
Are you calling on Charles Lee to release the full audio from start to finish, and or does the city have the audio?
I would call on Charles Lee or whoever he has sold the clip to that has the full audio clip. So whoever has bought it and whoever paid him for it to post it, that's who I would call on and do that. So maybe it'll magically appear after 3 years.
So you would like the full audio to be released?
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Also, Mayor, you mentioned that Mr. Lee essentially tried to blackmail either you or the city. Could you elaborate on some of the requests that he made, that if you didn't give him the $30,000, he would do A, B, C?
That was everything from, we'll make sure that, you don't get any black votes or in the community, or we'll tell the folks that you aren't doing what you said you were going to do, to I'll tell Karen Jones, tell everybody we need to burn the city down. We need to tear everything up on that day. And so those were some of the statements that were made along with many others. Yes, sir. One more?
One more, Mayor.
Okay. You get somebody, I'm sorry, Sal.
Some members of the city council have already expressed some disapproval of what you said. How are you going to kind of work to earn back their trust and work with them?
Well, I don't know if I heard disapproval. I would just ask them to think about where things are now they've heard the full story. None of them asked me the full story. So those that knew part of the story, I think, have a better understanding of it. So I think that this may help, not only with the council, but with the community. Again, I think perspective is key in this. Let me take a moment of personal privilege. 7 years on the bench in the probate court here in Montgomery County, I never had a complaint. I never had any issues of impropriety. I'm born and raised in Montgomery. I've got character witnesses from the time I was in St. Margaret's Hospital, February 20, 1974, all the way through now. So I'm not somebody who just magically appeared here. I'm not somebody who just magically created some myth around some story of what I'm doing or can't point to the results of what I've done. So from my standpoint, if there's someone who doesn't know me, it's because they don't want to know me that's on this council. There are enough people who can not only testify to who I am personally, but who can testify to who I am professionally and politically. And that's why I've always let my actions speak more than my words. Because I think at the end of the day, it matters less about what you say and more about what you do. And that's how I've always operated. All right? Thank you all so much. Thank you.